All right, let's get right into it. For 3 long years, the United States was basically a spectator as Europe just tore itself to pieces in the Great War. Then, suddenly, in 1917, the script flipped. So what exactly happened? What was it that pulled America out of its long-standing policy of neutrality and threw it right into the heart of a global war?
And we have to understand that the stakes here were astronomical. This wasn't just some regional conflict. The consequences of this war created shockwaves that, honestly, we are still feeling today. It led to a total redrawing of the world map, a devastating global depression, and lit the fuse for conflicts that would define the rest of the century.
So, to really get why America eventually jumped in, you first have to understand the Europe it was trying so hard to stay away from. At the turn of the 20th century, the continent was just a powder keg. It was simmering with new ambitions, old jealousies, and fierce rivalries, all just waiting for a spark.
And this tension, really, you can see it perfectly in the rivalry between two major powers. On one side, you've got Germany's new Kaiser, Wilhelm II. He looks over at the massive British Empire and essentially says, "I want one of those." And a big part of that meant building a huge, modern navy to compete on the world stage. But on the other side, you have Great Britain, who looks at this new German navy and doesn't see a country puffing its chest out. No, they see a direct existential threat to their control of the seas.
Now, this growing rivalry forced everybody to pick a side. Europe basically split down the middle into two massive armed camps. You had the Triple Entente, that's Great Britain, France, and Russia, staring down the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austro-Hungary, and Italy. The whole system was so fragile that one wrong move by anybody could drag everyone else into a massive war.
And if that wasn't complicated enough, you had another major hotspot brewing in the Balkans. The Ottoman Empire, which had controlled the region for centuries, was crumbling. This created a huge power vacuum, and both the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russia saw a golden opportunity to expand their own influence, which only added another layer of tension to an already unstable situation.
Meanwhile, an entire ocean away, the United States wanted absolutely nothing to do with any of this. The American focus was turned inward, on building its own nation, on growing its industrial might, and on staying out of what most Americans saw as Europe's constant, messy squabbles.
And this wasn't a new idea. This was a cornerstone of American identity, going all the way back to George Washington's farewell address in 1796. For more than a century, the guiding principle was simple: avoid getting tangled up in foreign alliances. But here's the great paradox of America's position. While it was trying to be diplomatically isolated, it was an absolute economic monster. By 1914, the U.S. was churning out over a third of the world's manufactured goods. That's roughly as much as Great Britain, France, and Germany combined. So you see the problem. America was trying to stay neutral, but its wallet was deeply, deeply connected to the rest of the world.
So what about its military? Well, the U.S. really wasn't ready for a big fight. The Army was pretty small, kind of outdated. The Navy was getting better for sure. It was modernizing. But the real wake-up call, in a way, was a small operation in Mexico chasing the revolutionary Pancho Villa. It wasn't a war, but it was a crucial field test that taught the military some invaluable lessons and led to the expansion of the National Guard as a proper strategic reserve.
Okay, so let's jump back to Europe, because that fragile balance we talked about, it was about to be completely shattered. All it was going to take was a single act of violence to set the entire continent on fire.
And this is the moment. June 28, 1914. A young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip assassinates Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who is the heir to the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire. For Austria-Hungary, this was more than a tragedy. It was the perfect excuse to finally crush its troublesome neighbor, Serbia. And what happens next is just a stunningly fast chain reaction. It's like watching dominoes fall. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Russia, which sees itself as Serbia's protector, starts mobilizing its army. Germany, Austria-Hungary's ally, then declares war on Russia. Then Germany invades neutral Belgium as a shortcut to attack France. And that single act, violating a neutral country, pulls Great Britain into the war. In just a little over a week, all the major powers of Europe were at war.
Back in the States, President Woodrow Wilson immediately declared that America would be neutral, and most Americans completely agreed with him. But a series of events began to act like a funnel, pulling the United States step by inevitable step right into the middle of the conflict.
So here's the thing about that neutrality. America might have been politically neutral, but it was anything but economically neutral. American banks were loaning billions of dollars to the Allies. American factories were selling them a staggering amount of supplies. At the end of the day, true neutrality was pretty much impossible when your economy is so tangled up with one side of the fight. Now, Germany knew it couldn't match the massive British Navy on the surface of the ocean, so it decided to go underneath. It unleashed a terrifying and deadly new weapon, the U-boat, or what we'd call a submarine. And their strategy was as simple as it was brutal. Use surprise torpedo attacks to sink any ship heading for Britain, choking off that critical supply line from the United States.
This strategy had a very real, very human cost. In May of 1915, a German U-boat torpedoed and sank the British passenger liner, the RMS Lusitania. Over 1,000 people died, and among the dead were more than 100 Americans. Suddenly, this war that was an ocean away felt terrifyingly close to home.
The sinking of the Lusitania, and other ships just like it, caused a huge wave of public outrage back in America. Germany's policy of unrestricted submarine warfare wasn't seen as a legitimate act of war. It was seen as an immoral attack on civilians. So the question hanging in the air became, how long can America just stand by while its own citizens are being killed on the high seas?
And then came the final straw, the knockout punch. British intelligence intercepted a secret telegram from the German Foreign Secretary, a man named Arthur Zimmermann, to the government of Mexico. And the offer inside was just mind-blowing. It said that if Mexico would declare war on the United States, Germany would help it win back the territory it had lost: Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona.
As you can imagine, when the Zimmermann telegram was published in American newspapers, any last bit of hope for staying neutral just evaporated. This wasn't happening in the middle of the Atlantic anymore. This was a direct threat to American soil. In April of 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. And in doing so, it ended its era of isolation and changed its place in the world forever.
America's entry into the war absolutely helped the Allies achieve victory. But the war's end didn't bring the lasting peace that so many had hoped for. Yet, it toppled 4 massive empires and completely redrew the map of the world, but it also left behind this toxic legacy of resentment and instability that would, tragically, lead directly to an even bigger, even deadlier global war just 20 years later.